we're going to start very quickly on a focus because you were, maybe you're going to start by introducing yourself, but you were at the Vatican last week speaking on indigenous expertise. So maybe you can introduce yourself first.
Thank you, Nora. And good morning, everyone. It's really a great pleasure to be with you and to be with my co-panelists here from Martine, Guillaume, and my sister Leah. So yes, I went to Vatican just a week ago, I can say. So we had a meeting co-hosted by the academia and directly with Pope. The interesting was how to put indigenous leaders from all the regions with some scientists, some of them are Nobel Prize, to discuss about the wisdom, the knowledge of the indigenous peoples that take us through the centuries to fix the nature, with the science or modern, I can say, knowledge, how we can take that all together. So that was really exciting. So to introduce myself, I'm an Mbororo indigenous woman coming from a pastoralist communities. My people are cattle herders, living around 6 countries, Chad, Cameroon, Nigeria, Central African Republic, and Sudan. Before colonization, of course, it used to be all our land, because I do have my relative, my cousins, who got all the nationalities of those countries that I name it to you. And of course, I ended up being born in Chad, then I became a Chadian by nationality. So that's who I am, and that's how also our knowledge are split, that I will talk with you about it in a while.
And what's so interesting about Hindou, and then I will introduce all my other co-panelists, because everyone is here now. But Hindou was at COP28, we were there together, at COP every year, you were at Davos, and you've been very diligently pushing for indigenous expertise, because for a long time, I think there was a lot of talk about using indigenous wisdom. It sounded very conceptual, but the reality is that there is an incredible expertise, and you and I shared a panel before on indigenous voices where you spoke of, maybe you can give us that example again before we go into the rest of our speakers, the example of identifying climate change just by observing insects, which is such a task and such an ability.
Right, Nora. So I get, maybe I can say lucky, but more heavy work, because going to the COP more than 10 years, every single year, and going to Davos, actually I decided to go there because the peoples over there, they think that they are the expert. And at the end of the day, they are not. They are the people who took us through what we are experiencing now. Climate change, warm, loss of biodiversity, and of course the conflict between everyone. So I decided to go there to tell them that you are not the future, we are the future, and you must sit and listen to indigenous people. So that's what took me to all those panels. So one of the examples that I was giving them is simple. I said, like, you guys, when you wake up in the morning, the easy thing is to take your phone, check the weather forecast. If it's going to be sunny, to have your sunglasses. If it's rainy, to have your umbrella, or call your extra coat. I said, like, no. When there is no electricity, of course, you run out of the battery, and then you just start panicking because you do not know what to do. I say, my grandmother is more expert than you guys here. She is PhD++ in everything, because she can just look at the sky positions. She can just like look at how the clouds are moving, the birds' migrations, the flowers, the trees, the little insect, and she can tell if it's going to rain in the next 2 hours, or if it's going to be a good rainy season for the next year, because her people are nomadic. She do not have shelter. So she have to understand if it's raining to pack her stuff, or if it's going to be sunny to pack her stuff. So she understand all the nature. So she have the best technology ever. So if you call yourself expert, what my grandmother will call herself, she's expert++.
Thank you. Experts. So was my grandmother. Now, imagine listening to our grandmothers and then combining it with modern science and technology and academia. I mean, we could solve everything. We could solve all the problems we have. We just need to combine the past and the future, or the present, however you want to define technology today. For some people, it's the present, and for some, it's the future. Speaking of which, we're going to be joined by other speakers that all, in their own way, have already incorporated the EI principles within their work. And I'm going to start with Léa Doriol, the Executive Director and founder of Oceanic Global, who's going to join us. Arizona Muse, the founder of Dirt Charity. Guillaume de Vesvrotte, founder of We Don't Need Roads. And Martina Nadal, straight from Barcelona, the partner and chief of impact at Domestic Data Streamers. So each one of them has already incorporated those principles. Arizona with ancient farming practices, Léa with the work you do with the Blue Standards, Guillaume, of course, integrating and working very closely with corporations so that they can adopt those principles. It's fundamental work that you're doing. Thank you for that. And Martina, who is demonstrating that AI, they merge and they meet. So maybe, Martina, you can start by introducing yourself and the work that you do, because I think it's very conceptual, but what you've been managing to do is groundbreaking. And if I'm not mistaken, I know I'm not mistaken, you guys just went on a very large tour in the US speaking to several universities, Ivy Leagues.
There we go. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. So my name is Martina Nadal. I'm partner at a studio which is called Domestic Data Streamers. And for the last 11 years, what we've been doing is working with data and storytelling to trigger change in terms of social justice, climate justice, and so on. So when the last boom of AI emerged, what we saw within our field was like a very radical dichotomy between people who would say, no, we will not use this at all, this is dangerous, and people who said, wow, this is like an amazing opportunity to optimize and make things very efficient and so on, but maybe with a little like humanitarian perspective, let's say. So what we said is that, well, there's a huge opportunity in here, no? We see that like many philosophers that at least argue that what makes us human, the essence of humanity, is very linked to storytelling and to sense making more than tool making. So it's not such a technical perspective because, for example, animals also develop tools, no? But like creating storytelling, sense making, and passing the knowledge from ones to others, it's very humane. So we decided to experiment creatively and critically in how could we use AI with this purpose. And so the project where we link more with AI and EI is one of the projects we developed, which is called Synthetic Memories. And it's a project where we use AI to reconstruct the memories of elder population who are losing their memory because of dementia or Alzheimer, through a methodology that basically interviews them, understands their stories, their moments, and generates images of undocumented moments of their pasts. So we've been basically testing this methodology and seeing how this can be used as a sort of reminiscence therapy tool, and also with other communities such as migrant communities or other vulnerable communities who lost, let's say, material traces of their pasts to reconstruct these images.
And of course, the first thing that came to mind when we started exchanging is that all the constructive memory that we could have for the elders, like your grandmother, my grandmother's passed, but maybe we can reconstruct also her memory. That would be wonderful. So yeah, that was the first idea that I had, and I'm sure there will be synergies possible. Also with the work of adventure scientists, I highly recommend that you do check what they do, which is inviting all of us who are hikers and lovers of nature to be an active hiker. When we go outside, we can actually document and then transmit the information to adventure scientists so that we ensure that we're preserving the nature that we so enjoy. So we become active members of preserving that nature just by being a nature lover, hiker, discoverer of the most beautiful places that we love to see in the world. Guillaume, on to you. You have, first of all, you and I completely connected at COP28, where we shared the same sentiment about how the integration of new principles was important. And I want to go back to the question, like, maybe we've done this the wrong way. Obviously we have. Newsflash, we had the hottest day in recorded history in 2024 in February. So clearly we've been doing things wrong. And that's why I really want to emphasize on the environmental intelligence. Like, this is an innate capacity that we have. And while we're focusing, and I'm not saying it's bad that we're having all this technology rising, I think it's amazing. Obviously, it's amazing. You're the proof of that, Martina. But we also need to remember our environmental intelligence. And that's what you try to do with the companies that you meet every day.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. The actual reason we built the company at the beginning was speed. So we've been advising collectively companies on sustainability for more than 20 years now. And so we have seen it when it was nothing in the business, when it rose as a communication topic, as a risk topic, as an industrial topic, and now it's a strategic topic. And it's a transformation topic, but it has become an emergency. Like this was actually the conversation we had at the COP, because everything was about action right now, doing things fast. But the main thing is that everybody was so late that yes, of course, we have to be fast. So 4 years ago, I think it was at the same moment you had the beginning of the COVID crisis, and we had also the latest version, the latest part of the year, the last IPCC report. Telling us that we had like 3 years left to change massive parts of the system if we wanted to just survive as a species. And having advised companies for 20 years on sustainability, we discovered that actually everybody was really, focused on their 2050 plans and trying to change things in maybe 30 years after them, let's say that, when the actual emergency was a matter of months, actually. And so we designed a company that was able to help the massive transformation at scale of the value chains and supply chains with the right speed. So by 2028, 2030 at last. And so this is how we began working on environmental intelligence, actually, because even if we put a term on that, we put a name on that now together, it was really about, okay, how do we find the right local experts able to help us gain speed? I'll explain. Many of the businesses are transforming right now with the same process. I find this idea interesting. I try this in a small scale. Then when it's working, I'll try to scale it. That means that when you speak about biodiversity, for instance, you will need at least 15 years to find the right way to work on it. When actually you have people on the local ground knowing a lot of things, having I call this a science. Of course it's a science, but it's not the same science base that we use usually. And they know a lot of things that are actually able to help us gain speed. So it's really about speed. And so we began the company by building a global network in 40 countries of experts and scientists. I think now we have 440 experts and scientists. And then we connect also with local experts that are actually knowing a lot of things that are able to help us correct things very, very quickly. As a matter of fact, you have to understand that less than 16% of the global businesses have already assessed their biodiversity footprint right now, when everybody is talking about biodiversity footprint. So, sorry, but what the actually, I mean, it's what's going on. So that was really about equipping this biodiversity work very fast.
Absolutely. And I think it's a very good point that a lot of people talk about carbon footprint. We talk so much about it, but we don't talk about biodiversity footprint. We don't talk about water footprint. We have a massive crisis in water, and we actually have a great speaker, Mrs. Aziza, who's going to be here speaking about the water crisis. I think we're just kind of forgetting that we have, I mean, obviously we have a multi-crisis, but the footprint, it's a footprint in everything. It's not just that. And we could talk about the soil footprint. And now I'm going to pass on to Arizona, who's integrating ancient farming practices. And I'd like to mention something that's very important. It's not just about indigenous expertise. For me, being indigenous is having an indigenous mindset. So for me, a farmer, and I meet some, and we're going to meet some today, also have that indigenous practice in the sense that they have a methodology that is so ancient that is being neglected, overlooked, not being utilized to our detriment. And that's what you try to bring back to the forefront.
And I would add the word intuition as well. Farmers get very in touch with their intuition, particularly when they're farming in a way that their big ambition is to connect with the land, to even speak to the land and allow the land to speak to them. And it's quite magical what happens. I founded an organization 3 years ago. It's called Dirt Charity, and we work with farmers all over the world essentially to regenerate soil, because regenerating soil is one of the most important and least expensive climate solutions that we have. And what we're doing is we're working mostly with the biodynamic farming movement, which is a global movement whose methodology was aroused by indigenous farming from all over the world, particularly in India and in Europe. In Europe, it couldn't have even been called indigenous at the time because it was too modern. This type of farming is 100 years old, so it was called peasant farming at the time. But it was going back to the indigeneity of the Europeans who had the land wisdom, because of course they did. Just like everybody always had land wisdom, and it's always there for us. The wisdom in the land is there to be learned again and there to be reconnected with, because the land hasn't changed. We learned everything we knew from the land. And so when we go back, even if we know nothing, even if, like me, I grew up in a very Western society, super privileged, really lacking in many, many things because of that, but comfortable in so many other ways. and so I had very little connection to land. I didn't grow up thinking it was possible to speak to plants or to have messages come from nature. And this is something that I am realizing is absolutely possible to learn again. It really is. If you have teachers, if you're looking for it, and it's so mesmerizing and it's so enriching. My life now is so much more interesting than it used to be, than it would have ever been had I not gone on this path, which at first I called a sustainability journey when I was 26 years old and realized that, the word biodiversity isn't really being used in front of me very often. I was a model at the time. I still am a model. I grew up in the fashion industry because of having this job as a model, and biodiversity was not something that fashion was talking about at all. This was almost 10 years ago, or it was about 10 years ago, yeah. And I was super lucky. My career went very well, so I was in the design studios with the head designers of the biggest fashion brands we've ever heard of. They're mostly in this city right here. And nobody was talking about the supply chain. Everyone was just thinking, imagining, speaking as if fashion was made in factories or even ateliers in Paris, which we know it is not. There are so many different scopes behind the atelier where all the real work happens, where the production happens. And this is, in the fashion industry, an incredibly long and complex supply chain filled with violence. Violence to the world, to the earth, to nature, and violence to the humans along the supply chain as well. Every single garment that I have ever worn, that you have ever worn, has a story. And we need to ensure that these stories become positive stories for the people who made our clothes and for the earth who supplied us with everything that we wear. And when we go back to the bottom of every supply chain, there's a farm and there's soil. Because farmers grew our clothes for us just as they grew our food for us. And if the clothes weren't farmed materials like cotton, wool, silk, leather, then they were made of polyester and nylon, which are mined materials. They are fossil fuel byproducts, but massive, massive industry, so not sustainable in the sense of the word byproduct. But I'll stop there. That's what we do. We regenerate soil as a climate solution, emphasizing fashion and non-food crops, that it can be grown in ways that support nature and support the positive development of humanity as we continue to share this planet with every other living being who's on it.
Thank you, Arizona. She's Superwoman. She literally was in another side of Paris like 10 minutes ago.
I came on a bike. It was really fun.
And on to you, Léa Doriol, who's been doing incredible work. I'm so inspired by you. I'm so honored to be here with you today. Not only because you've managed to weave in storytelling from the elders. You were at COP27 in Egypt. You had an amazing delegation of ocean elders, indigenous ocean elders, bringing in their wisdom. And you are transforming the world of industry that we love, one that we love, which is hospitality. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Nora. And maybe just before diving into my work, I just want to say what a privilege it is to be able to sit in circle here, or semicircle, with people from so many different backgrounds. Because as we're starting to speak about sustainability, or the next step to sustainability, we need to be weaving together all different disciplines. And so for me, it's really inspiring, actually. I'm normally just on an ocean panel or just on a water panel, and we need to start to see how do oceans and soil start to bridge, oceans and biodiversity credits and frameworks with corporations. So just wanted to plant that seed. So I'm actually the founder of an organization called Oceanic Global. And Oceanic means related to and of the ocean. And I wanted to share that because we're all inherently oceanic. We live on a blue planet. It makes up 95% of the biosphere, the ocean. The ocean is responsible for sustaining all life on Earth. And most of us are extremely disconnected. Here we sit in Paris, and most people have no idea how your daily choices are going to impact the ocean. And so our work is very much taking a very broad approach to engage all different levels of stakeholders to come back into balance with the ocean. And so we designed blueprints across these levels, so with educational campaigns, working with industries through a program called the Oceanic Standard that I'll share a little bit more about, and then how do we weave oceans into global convenings, for example, at COPs with climate, because right now they're still seen as very different issues. And our approach is also making sure that we have a diversity of voices when we're looking at creating these blueprints. So we don't see the private sector separate to bringing in indigenous wisdom holders and government. Anytime we're hosting a dialogue, we're making sure that all these voices are at the table, because we need to be designing very, very diverse solutions. And as was previously shared, there's so much to gain in bringing what has worked so well with the people who have been and continue to steward most of the world's biodiversity, with a very, very positive impact on the environment, and the opportunities that we have and the need to accelerate that at scale with different frameworks are becoming available. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you. Thank you, Leah. I literally just had a ha-ha moment. As we were talking and I'm listening to you guys, I think one of the biggest, because I was going to get to ask you what your challenges were, and I'm going to start with you. But I think one of the challenges that we have, and I remember one of my fondest memories visiting the indigenous village of my parents for the first time when I was 16, was to sit in a circle and hear the eldest person in the village, who has a very specific name and title, tell stories about coyotes and how we could hear them in a distance and what they meant for the village. I think maybe our stories were overlooked because we have such a poetic way to say things. And I think it's why it's so important to merge it with science, because even though we have indigenous people have a very poetic ways to say things, it is not devoid of beauty and importance and technicality. And I think, and maybe you can concur with me, and of course we're a different generation. We're trying to carry on the words of our ancestors and their knowledge with the words of today. And that's why it's so important for us to work together. I think for many, many years, I worked in economic diplomacy, and one of the words that we used literally pretty much in every meeting was competitiveness. Competitiveness, we have to be competitive. We have competitiveness clusters. We do this, we do that. And I think now this word is so obsolete. I think it's all about cooperation, regardless of the tone and language that is being used by the person in front of you. So my epiphany or my ha-ha Oprah moment was, please embrace the poetry that we bring. Maybe you can share with us what's your challenge.
You are right. The world is really, especially the Western world, is in competitiveness. How I can get better than you, how I can do more than you, how I can extract more than you. At the end of the day, We do not put value of what we are having. And it's different from the indigenous peoples. So firstly, I want to remind you that indigenous peoples in the world, we represent 5% of the world's populations. We protect 80% of the world's biodiversity, 80. And we are protecting 25% of the land. So that means we are the stewardship of the earth. We are the guardian of the ecosystem. And when I say 80%, people always say oh, so do you mean that the rest of the population are just 20%? It's yes, because our peoples live across all the ecosystem, from the savanna to the desert, to the glaciers, to the mountain, to all the tropical forests around the world. We are living there, and we are protecting those ecosystems. And when you remember, I taught you my people live across 6 countries, and only my people, my direct cousin and cousin, so that means we are living in a big area. And all indigenous peoples across the world, we are all having a collective right. We do not have an individual right, so that avoid the competitions between who can get the most one. So as we do have the collective right, we take the decision collectively. We think always collectively. We think for our generation, but we think for the 7 upcoming generations. And that's what I grew up learning, what my father is telling me. So not only I know the name of my ancestors, 7 of them, but I know what they did in their life. I have to know absolutely, because when I take the decision, I have to remember what my decision of today can impact the 7 upcoming generations. If it's going to impact them negatively, I'm not going to be a good leader. How are they going to remember me? But the world of now, they're thinking about, okay, 2030, 2050, we have to make that. Really, 2050, it's 1 generation. So are you thinking about the long generation? So all those knowledge are oral. So as they are oral, they are neglected by others. They do not think that we are expert. They do not think that we do have knowledge. If you didn't went to school, you do not speak French, English, Arabic, or one of the UN or major languages, you do not write it, that means no, you have no knowledge. Those who went to school think that they come to our communities, they say, we are there to help you. You are not there to help us. You must listen from us. How are you going to help me if you do not understand how I'm living, how I'm caring to my peoples? So maybe you think that I need water, but maybe water is not my problem. Maybe I need land. And you just put the things, say oh, you are poor because you do not have $1 a day. We are really? With your cash, if you cannot buy something, you are not rich. So what's the definitions, the global definitions of the world? For us, I'm poor if I do not have land. I'm poor if my cattle cannot get a water in pastures. But I don't care if I have $1 million, I cannot buy my water to drink or my food to eat. What's the mean? Am I rich or am I poor? So all those kind of mindset need to be changed. And how it's changed, so I think we need to combine our science knowledge, technology, traditional knowledge together. And let me end by one example. So I try to do that with building a participatory mapping. So I do 2D and 3D participatory mapping. Quick example on the 2D participatory mapping. I use the satellite image. So I get the last satellite image from a big organization who have satellite in the sky. So when I print the map in the biggest scale, I go to the community. The best satellite image is nothing as data. They look at it, they're oh, many things are missing. So I build a process when we put all the traditional knowledge. So I work on 3,500 kilometers square of the map with more than 556 community leaders. So that means villages, space for the nomadic peoples, and the islands around Lake Chad. So when we put the knowledge at the end of the day, I take the photo of it, I digitalize it, and those people who didn't went to school, They become the expert. They have like the best map than a satellite image map. So that helped them to better manage their natural resources. It's helped them to mitigate the conflict over the resources because they know exactly what's missing and how they can work together. And it's helped to give a woman land right for the first time. Because where the Western knowledge worked for so long and advocate for so long, it didn't work, community knowledge put it and give the woman land right. And now that's what we are working on it. So we need to change our mind, understand that there is no one expertise, there is different knowledge system, but work with the best knowledge system that can drive the peoples and the planet.
Thank you. Thank you, Hindou. I love how you touched on language, which we can move more into the deep dive after, but language is so important. I'm trying to learn Tifinagh and to understand some of the knowledge of my family. Leah, what's your biggest challenge in your day-to-day implementation of EI?
So I think my biggest challenge is a little bit more our biggest challenge, which essentially is we need a major shift in consciousness. And everyone has alluded to that in different ways, in reconnecting back to nature, operating as part of nature. So a big part is also this idea of, abundance over scarcity, making sure that we're not getting fixated on the same systems that are getting us here, and not getting stuck on one current system. We got really stuck on the fossil fuel industry. This is the situation that we're now in. Now we're starting to design in renewables and carbon and ESG. And again, we start getting stuck on very narrow-minded frameworks. And the reality is that when it comes to oceans, we need to take a really localized, diverse approach. It is not one size fits all. And so the biggest challenge, I would say, is getting people really reconnected back to the oceans so that they understand the importance they can start to operate with. And then that we start to design really holistically, but taking into consideration the local biodiversity, the people who are stewarding those areas are in relationship with those areas, and being able to take a localized approach that also zooms out onto a kind of a meta, more global framework. So it's a complex one. I think when it comes to oceans, we have to also realize it's very much cowboy land. It's very unregulated. So that there's a different level of responsibility that comes in, essentially.
Yeah, and I think one example of challenges within the ocean field, when I was at COP28 and we had the EI deep dive with economists and policymakers, they discovered in the region of Dubai, in the Gulf, that the coral reefs are more resistant and more resilient in that area. They don't know why. So now they're actively working with scientists and local communities to understand why, and if there could be some type of stem cell identification that could be then infused in other coral reefs around the world that are suffering and dying. So that's an example of EI. It's really to profoundly observe, to work with local communities, to understand why this is working this way here and not this way here, and what we can get from the best of what's working and implementing it somewhere else.
Yeah, and I just want to add with that, because when we're talking about the ocean, there's so much opportunity for regeneration. Like, nature is so amazing. If you allow it to thrive, it will. And, we see it with marine protected areas. Like, it bounces back in times that we could not even expect. So being able to work with it, and again, working with local stewards to ensure that that is done to its full success.
That's what you do, and that's what Arizona, that's what you do, because there's the methodology of health and harmony, which has been here at ChangeNOW before, and I've mentioned at the beginning, Adventure Scientists, tenure facility, health and harmony. Health and harmony does radical listening, and I know that you spend a lot of time learning and listening, and that's what you say often.
I do, and the challenge that I find, I'm sorry to be blunt, but I'm just going to say it, it's just money is a really, really big challenge that as the founder and someone who runs a charity, I'm up against every single day. It was a shocker to me how before I started DIRT, I started my climate activism and was quite active in the fashion industry already, talking about sustainable fashion, sourcing materials differently, and all the things that go along with that. And I thought, oh, I'll start a charity because the industry is so desperate to give its money away to good solutions. Let me tell you how surprised I was when the whole industry, even though I gave them this silver platter of a solution for all their material needs, no, they have not been running at me throwing checks. No. I'm waiting to be proven wrong, so I'm very, very excited for the day that the big fashion corporations do come and do give generously. And I'm really grateful to our donors in fashion who have given already. And so that's the charity side of money. We need to see money going better into philanthropy and more of it. There are definitely certain gaps and bridges that can only be filled by philanthropy right now. There are business solutions for many things, but if you look closely, there are gaps around that a business solution cannot serve right now. Then there's another side of money, which is the government money, the subsidy money. And particularly in agriculture, where I'm most aware of how subsidies are given, it's not working. It's not working. We are paying the wrong mindset is what we're paying to do the wrong things that are causing more harm. So we need to rethink our subsidies. We need to rethink them in a just way so that we can have a transition that does not leave vulnerable communities behind. And when I say vulnerable communities, I'm thinking about farmers, because farmers are very, very vulnerable to losing subsidies. It's a terrible situation for a farmer when subsidies change, and if it's done insensitively, it can cause a lot of harm to families who did no wrong. And so we need to think about our subsidies and then our lobbying groups. We really need to think about how do we allow lobbying groups to spend money? Is it okay with us that our governments can be lobbied? I am a citizen in a country and come from countries that are all based in very, very deep capitalist systems. I am someone who's been really benefited by the capitalist system. I got super lucky. I was in a job where being white and having blonde hair meant that there were so many more jobs available for me, and I was probably earning more than my sisters who were models who didn't have white skin and blonde hair. And yet, I don't feel safe in a capitalist system because of what I've learned since, because of all the damage that I see that is happening. And this is a money problem. And I don't think it's going to bring us a safe future if we continue to address our climate crisis and our social crisis with the same frameworks and mindsets that brought us into this problem. And I know that this is why you've done this panel like this, why you've arranged us in this way to talk about this. So forgive me for being blunt, but we really, really need to look at the way we spend money, the way we give money, and the way our whole economic systems are organized, because it's not working for anybody.
Thank you, Arizona. Thank you so much for bringing this up, because if we really look at our society, the poorest people are teachers and farmers. Education and food. Isn't that what we most need? Guillaume, please tell us what's your biggest challenge, because I know you have many.
Yeah, so my job is supposed to be solving the challenge. So,
Yes.
okay, but yes, we have one massive challenge I was thinking about. And if I may just divert a bit, I think you need a business model, and I think we could help. So let's connect on that.
Sleek, huh?
The thing is, no, I was thinking about a very precise situation we had like 1.5 years ago, something like that. We work with with some folks at the UNDP, especially with the SDG 14 people in New York, and so I'm looking at you because it was about the mangroves. And the main question we had to solve was, okay, how do we find a way to finance the stopping of the mangrove destruction, and how do we finance its new expansion, because we absolutely need it. Well, you'll explain better than me how and why, but still, if I can summarize it, we are just all dead if we don't maintain the mangrove. That's one of the points. And it's about biodiversity and climate and things. It's a fascinating thing, the mangroves. And we were aiming at financing 18 million acres of mangroves with that conversation, and the main conversation was, okay, so the UN and that kind of projects are totally financed by charity, and so that means that it depends entirely on people going to cocktails and trying to be kind to old and rich people. So that's the main summary. So how do we find, because it's the crisis, because COVID hit, because a lot of different things, charity will be hit also. It will be the first thing to be cut off. And so how do we build a business model? And behind these conversations, what was interesting is that some of the biggest tech companies were behind the conversation, trying to figure out how they could build a business model out of that. And so, well, we thought about it a lot. Like, okay, how do you, and what was interesting is that we didn't find out. So we are still in look of that. But one of the first purposes of We Don't Need Roads at the beginning, one of our activities has always been to help charities to find out how they can become independent and free by impact business models that they can build with companies, but not always. My main challenge, so end of the diversion, sorry. I think our main challenge is, as you said, is culture and how we implement actually the ancient knowledges in what we do. That if I can explain, when you transform a whole supply chain and value chain globally for any company in the world, you're always speaking to a lot of different people at a lot of different levels. Once you have decided to integrate, which is a very good idea and which we already do, ancient knowledge and local knowledges into your understanding of biodiversity and your biodiversity work, you still have to advertise it inside the client, inside the company, inside the whole value chain to very, very different people everywhere. People in business, people in logistics, people on the field, people in the marketing, people at the finance. And so it's a whole new mindset that you have to advertise. So I think our main challenge is not really technical. It's because we know how to do it. It's more like, okay, how do we translate it in a way the business will understand and aggregate? So that's the main point I think we have. And we have solutions, but it's still a challenge.
And we can go more into when we go to the deep dive, which will be in the workshop ecosystem in a few minutes. Martina, I'm going to let you tell your challenge, and then my sister Hindou here, I want to jump on the money issue, but please go with your challenge first.
Let's go. So for us, I would say the biggest challenge is understanding that AI doesn't stand for artificial intelligence, but for artificial ignorance in many senses. So they're just like probabilistic models that converge possibilities but are not able to do the sense-making processes many times. So sometimes I see that there's a very big gap between a lot of communities, like women, like vulnerable communities and AI, because maybe they feel it's too complex, it's not for them, it's too technical or whatsoever. But I think like we need to break this gap, this distance, to really get close to it and understand which is its potential, and how to be also very critical on which are the sort of solutions that are not worthy, that do not make sense, and very connected to this, which is the impact of all these usages, because there's a huge environmental impact that very little people is speaking about. Like they are opening a very big AI center, Microsoft in Spain now, and we're in one of the highest droughts. Like there's no water in the country almost. Where's this like resources coming from, and how do we understand which is the social impact of each of these initiatives and which is the environmental impact? So in a way, this is very related to language. The interface AI is using is language, which is the oldest interface we've used as humans, no, in a way. And that makes it very accessible, but also makes us think that AI is intelligence, therefore. No? We've also always associated intelligence to language, but this is not directly connected. It's just like they are using zeros and ones, but in a language model. So we need to like re-understand how this works and really like be critical and engage with it and lose the fear to get closer and observe what's just and what's not, and audit the algorithms and really understand what's the impact of each of the AI decisions.
So yeah, so use AI intelligently, which I don't think we're really doing all the time. As you said, like, the impact on the environment is huge. I mean, just quote unquote, like, when we were preparing this, I sent her a link to this person that I'm not going to name, who does these amazing AI photos, but live photos of these flowers, of all types of flowers. I'm like, oh, that would be great to document all the flowers that we're losing or that are endangered. And you told me that it's actually really bad for the environment because it consumes so much energy and not in the best way. Please, Hindou, tell us about the money factor, which is an important factor.
Yeah, so Sister Arizona, the money is not the problem. The system is the problem. There is money there. When you look at how much the oil company making as benefit for 1 year, when you look at all the bankers, how much they are making for 1 year, how many benefits that they are making. So the money is there. The problem is the system. When they start just calling themselves donors, and they put you recipient here. So that's a problem. Like, we are not recipients. If they are donors, they get the money from where? They get the money because they are exploiting all the natural resources, because they abuse of the natural resources and they get those money. And at the end of the day, we are not a recipient. They wanted to dictate how you can use the money because they are giving you as a charity. It's not a charity. So we need to change the system. Firstly, we have to be calling ourselves partners. They are financial partners because they abuse the nature. We are ecological partners. They are the CEO, like Chief Executive Officer. We are the CEO, the Chief Ecological Officer. So we are together. So if they are giving the money, it's not a charity that they are giving us. They are giving us because we deserve this money. We are fixing the problem that they did. So when we start thinking about changing this system of economy of the money, so I think we can be equal and we can get the access to fix it. So that's where I found the problem. The money is there. And we are so tired about just a commitment. When we go to the COP, remember the COP 28, COP 27, all those.
We were there.
How much that they are committing? They are committing that how many billions for nature, how many billions for forests, how many billions for indigenous peoples. When you look at on the ground, how much going as cash in the tables to us? Nothing, because they are putting the barrier, saying that you need to fill all those Excel sheets that no one read about it, or doing the report that no one know about it, and at the end of the day, they are keeping the money and just talking about it. So if my grandmother can just be expert on the weather forecast, she is the one who can know how to plant the trees, because you cannot get the tree overnight, because she know it is the process with the love, with everything that she can do that. Why she cannot manage your little money? She can do that. We protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. We can manage the billion that they are talking about it. So they need to change the system. We are not recipients, we are partners, and then we can see whose impact will change the world.
Amen. I think that's essentially what Arizona was saying. It's the distribution of money that's the problem. Because in fact, you're right, there is money. And it's, you know what's really interesting? I just had another ha-ha moment. We just hit the hottest ever in history of heat in February. In February. This is in the northern hemisphere too, and also in the southern. But it is also now that we're hitting records, like blowing, like we're gonna reach, apparently soon we're gonna reach trillionaires. There's gonna be trillionaires on our planet. And yet our Earth has never been so depleted. And I'm just gonna close this and then we're gonna continue at the workshop, but I asked for a definition of intelligence to a tree expert. And this is what he said. Any creature that navigates the challenges of its existence, we talked about challenges, any creature that navigates the challenges of its existence can be considered intelligence. So question number one for us as we go to the workshop is, are we really intelligent at this moment? And then the second thing that he said is, these challenges, be matter of survival or simple well-being, forge the foundation of intelligence. And I think we really have to ask ourselves these questions because we're on the threshold of the simple well-being. We're not going to be comfortable. We're already not comfortable. We already had issues that are unprecedented. I'm talking about the people, the poor people, because it's usually the first people that are being affected by this uncomfortability. In Rio de Janeiro, just a few days ago, with 62 degrees Celsius. That's 62. I mean, take that number with you. Just forget about the money. Take those numbers with you. And I'm not trying to be paternalizing or maternalizing, because I come from a matriarchate. I really want people to understand that the environmental intelligence principle is about togetherness. It's about working together and being humble within our own intelligence. Thank you.